Okay, so tonight, Bezras Hashem, we're going to be continuing with our series of shirim on the teachings and the Torah of Rav Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern Shlita. And tonight, the shir is going to be titled Mediated Immediacy. Now, mediated immediacy is my rough translation or my conceptual translation of a concept that comes out very clearly in the writings of Rav Yitzchak Meir. And it's based on previous Mekubalim, in particular the Ben Ish Chai, as well as the Vilna Gaon, as well as the Leshem. But nevertheless, Rav Yitzchak Meir is Machadesh, to use that word delicately, a Lashon based on a Medrash Chazal that brings about a turn or a renewal of understanding in the sugya that we're going to be discussing. But before anything, before I start teaching what Rav Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern, according to my humble opinion, is describing throughout multiple places in his writings, like any other shir, the makoros that we base this on are particular sources that are chosen out of a klal. Everything that is said tonight is my estimated interpretation of what Rav Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern is trying to say. Now, based on the writings of his Talmidim, we have a tfisa, we have a kli to hold on to, an oznaim laTorah, something that gives us handles to grab hold of the Torah of the tzaddik. But nevertheless, the limited understanding of the reader of these writings, myself, and my limited ability to convey what Rav Yitzchak Meir is trying to say, make it ever important for me to express that these are my ideas and not Rav Yitzchak Meir's ideas, but my interpretation of Rav Yitzchak Meir's ideas. That being said, what we're going to try and do with tonight's shir is we're going to try and answer up a fundamental question that emerges out of last week's shir. What we discussed last week was that leis machshava tvisa beklal, that when it comes to grasping the infinite, when it comes to grasping God kavyachol in its essence, ba'atzmuso yisparach, muhuso va'atzmuso, as it's described in the writings of Hasidus. And we showed that for Rav Yitzchak Meir, one of the fundamental clauses or principles that a person must hold in front of their eyes, no matter what they're learning, in the writings of the Arizal or the writings of Maharis Sarug and the Kabbalah that precedes the worlds of the Arizal, as we're going to see in future shirim, or whether we're discussing the Rishonim or the Rishonim, down to and including the particularized manifestations of Hasidus, a person must always hold in mind the fact that when we speak about Etzem, when we speak about HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvodo u'ba'atzmo, God itself, God himself, we are always already talking about a revelation that God has placed within the world so that human beings can understand or grasp it properly. But never, heaven forfend, or God forbid, or chas v'shalom, are we describing God in and of itself, because that would be tantamount, according to all of the Mekubalim, but especially through the emphasis that Rav Yitzchak Meir places, that would be tantamount to the corporealization of godliness, to applying limitation and midos and constriction and positive assertions to the concept of the infinite, which would always already be a negation of its infinitude. Because by claiming that God can be grasped, you're claiming that the human mind has the capacity of discerning the truth of infinity, which would already make infinity shayach or related to the finite, thereby taking that infinity of godliness and making it something that is close or related to the finitude or the finite nature of human beings. And therefore, Rav Yitzchak Meir needs to stress very deeply and cautiously, to the point that he uses strong lashonos of chas v'shalom, and there's an isur gomer almost, to claim that a person can grasp atzmusa yisparach, the essence of God, so to speak, in whatever sense that might mean. The question that emerges out of this warning or out of this principle is a question that might not bother the minds of the intellect, but it will bother the heart of the sensitive soul. Because on the one hand, we understand the interdiction, the prohibition, the isur that Rav Yitzchak Meir is placing on describing the essence or grasping the essence of God, because of all of the reasons that we described until now. But nevertheless, something doesn't sit right, because what we've been taught and what we know so deeply within the heart of hearts, within the panemius of the yechidah of the nefesh, each and every Jewish child understands, and each and every Jew is capable of being moser nefesh for the truth, that we have a direct connection to godliness. That when we daven straight to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And with our emunah, we touch the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu kavyachol. And that through our contemplation and through our hisboidedus and through our hisboinenus, whether a person is rooted in the tracks trenched by Chabad Hasidus, or the tracks opened up, the Shvil Min Hasad opened up by Rabbi Nachman and his Talmidim, whether it's through the philosophical and intellectual speculation of the mind, b'derech hisboinenus, or whether it's through the solitude and the loneliness of personal prayer and the outpouring of the soul that Rabbi Nachman taught us, which is hisboidedus, or whether it's through the avoida of yichudim that we're going to see the Kamarna Rebbe came to teach us. However you splice it, what we all know deeply is that when we connect to God, we're connecting to God, and there's nothing else in the world that we're connecting to. And that when we connect to God, the distinctions between essence and inessential on a certain emotional level falls away. So on the one hand, we have this deep philosophical truism. And when I say philosophical, I don't mean speculative in its own right, but I mean ontological. That when we contemplate the ability of the Jewish individual, of the neshama, to grasp godliness, it's fundamentally important to remind ourselves day in and day out, moment to moment, that whatever we speak about, no matter how high along the rungs of the ladder of spirituality that we go, we will never truly reach the apex because there's always room to grow. Yet on the other hand, on an emotional, almost intuitive, situated level, we understand deeply that when we daven, when we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, when we say Baruch She'amar V'haya Ha'olam, when we make Birchas HaShachar, when we say a bracha of Shahakol, or when we do a mitzvah, or when we try and fight for a little bit more of emunah in this world, or a little bit more bitachon in our own particular situations, that we're touching the essence of God, that there's no distinctions there of essence and non-essence, or midos or essence, but we're connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's all there is to it. Or we're connected to the Ribono Shel Olam, the master of the world, or Hashem, or the ineffable name that can only be described by way of a way that it is not truly written, however a person wants to describe it. So what we find is we have this paradox that's held in the heart of every individual, almost between the heart of the mind and the mind of the mind. Because according to the mind of the mind, according to the intellectual capacity of the mind to discern the secrets of Allocution and to penetrate the depths of godliness and to come to a place of understanding that we can never truly understand the essence, that stands in contradistinction to the heart of the mind, the lave of the individual, which understands deeply that in spite of all of the interdictions and prohibitions against grasping the essence, there is a place deeply embedded within each and every particular heart, that each and every person, noida b'sha'ar bala, in their own subjective situated stance and their relationship with godliness, has a deeply intense and private and powerful relationship with the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the point that our words go directly to Hashem, and not to some, God forbid, intermediary or sphera that stands separate and apart, God forbid, from godliness. So the question is, how do we come and align these two paradoxical notions? How do we come and understand the prohibition of grasping the essence and the deeply lived emotional sense that we have an intimate relationship with the essence? And that's what this year is coming to talk about. Because what Rav Meir is doing is he's really providing a reading of a medrash based on a pasuk. The pasuk is in Parshas Ve'eschanan, in Perek Daled, pasuk Zayin. The pasuk says as follows: Ki mi goy gadol asher loy Elokim krovim alav. Who is like this great nation who God stands close to them? Ka Hashem Elokeinu, like Hashem our God. B'chol karenu elav. Anytime we call out, it's directly to him. So the medrash on this pasuk, the sifri on this pasuk comes and says, Elav v'lo lemidosav. That the pasuk is coming to tell us that when a person reaches out to God, when a person attempts to elevate themselves, even the slightest movement of elevation out of the confines of physical laziness and constriction and heaviness that holds us down to this world. Like Rabbi Nachman says, Kol nituk shene'etak et atzmo megashmiyuto. Every movement that a person engages in to remove themselves or elevate themselves out of their situatedness within the confines of this worldly sluggishness is a direct relationship with a love, velo lemidosav. It's a direct connection to God himself, so to speak, and not to the midos or to the traits of godliness. So we have a direct warning based on the pasuk from the words of Chazal that says that a person must always ensure that they hold in mind that their relationship is directly towards God, and not, God forbid, to the midos or the traits or the worlds or the spheros or the partzufim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created and revealed himself through. But on the other hand, we have a fully expressed statement in Chazal which describes, can a person come and really cleave to God himself? Can a person truly come and have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself? Halo eish ochlo. Won't a flame consume him like Nadav and Avihu? Again, highlighting what we saw last week from Rav Meir, that how can we possibly claim that we can have a direct relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvoido ba'atzmo in his essence? Isn't it impossible for an individual to cleave to the essence? Isn't the essence of the infinite already speaking away the possibility of anything finite? Doesn't the possibility of reaching God in its essence, so to speak, already annihilate any conception of selfhood or subjectivity that stands alone and separate from godliness? Halo eish ochlo. Won't a flame consume him? Is it even possible to conceive of grasping the essence? And Chazal's statement there is that Ella hadavek b'midosav. You're right, a person can't connect to God himself. A person can't connect to the etzem of God. A person can't grasp the essential nature of the infinite because we are always going to be finite and the infinite will always be infinite. And like we said last week, kedushasi l'maala mikedushasechem. No matter how holy you have become, no matter how high along the rungs of spiritual development you have reached, a person will always already be wanting and lacking and chaser, because relatively speaking, no matter how high we go, there's always an infinite level that we can raise ourselves, ad ein sof. So we have this conceptual distinction or paradox in statements of Chazal, that on the one hand, a love velo lemidosav, a person has to cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not to his traits and not to those things which HaKadosh Baruch Hu created. But on the other hand, connecting to the essence is an impossibility, both on a psychological level, which reminds us that we always have to yearn for more, even when we feel we've accomplished, that even when we reach a level of satiety and a satisfaction, we always have to be maskir, the chisaron that animates that satisfaction, to bring the lack that animates constitutes our subjectivity into that sense of fullness, so that we never become satisfied and that we always yearn for more, even in our state of satisfaction. And on an ontological level, which states that a person who is created and finite can never truly reach the recesses and the depths of the infinite. And this is where Rav Meir comes along and he offers a locution or a formulation or a lashon that, as far as I am aware, is not found anywhere else. Now again, Rav Meir is not, God forbid, creating his own model of understanding the words of Chazal or the words of the Torah or the words of the Arizal, but Rav Meir is basing himself on the history, on the entire trajectory of Kabbalah. And this is one of the unique chidushim of Rav Meir, that he's never being mechadesh anything, he's always being mitlabesh. Everything that Rav Meir says is garbing a previous tzaddik who came and said something similar. So all of Rav Meir's words, depending on which zerem or which stream you choose to point out, which all unified to create the Yam HaChachma, and in my humble opinion, one of the novelties is that while other tzaddikim have shown particular streams that lead to the sea, Rav Meir has created multiple streams that lead to the Yam, to show that there is this all-encompassing grasp of the Torah, which says, at the end of the day, Kol HaTorah Kulahu Inyan Achas, that the entirety of the Torah and the entirety of all of the opinions that create the distorted voice of Machlokes create a shalom that is greater than the possibility of one singular voice. That whichever way you look, whether you want to trace it back through the writings of the Rebbe Rashab, back to the Alter Rebbe, and through his students, Rav Aharon of Sterilisk, or Rav Yitzchak Isaac of Hamel, or whether you want to bring it through the Teres Chacham, back up to the Shem and Sasa, and back up to the Rashash from the Zerem of Sfardi Kabbalah, or whether you want to take it through the writings of Rav Moshe David Vali, back up to the writings of the Ramchal, through the Beis Medrash of Padua, or you want to elevate yourself through the writings of the last generations of Breslov through Rabbi Nassan back to Rabbi Nachman, or whether you want to go through the iterations of Kamarna in our generation up to through the Zohar Chai. However a person wants to look at the writings of Rav Meir, including the students of the Gra as well, from the Leshem to Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver to Rav Menachem Mendel Mishklov, back to the Vilna Gaon himself, however you want to look at it, Rav Meir is always rooting what he's saying on previous iterations of Kabbalah, so that it's almost impossible to deny what Rav Meir is describing in his system of Kabbalah, because to deny or to try and push back against the Chidushim of Rav Meir would force an individual to confront the real textual edifice that exists with all of the previous generations, back to and including the writings of the Rashash, the writings of the Arizal, and what we're not zeicha to as much yet is Rav Meir's readings of the Zohar. We don't really see how Rav Meir reads the writings of the Arizal back into the Zohar. It's clear how he reads the Arizal back into the Ramak and back into Rabbeinu Azriel of Gerona as he learns from his Rebbe of Moshe Shatz. But we're not zeicha yet to how Rav Meir reads the Zohar, although he utilizes the Zohar and his Bakiyas in the Zohar is ad lahafliya. It's not an easy jump to take Rav Meir's treatment of the Arizal and move it back to the Zohar, something that Be'ezus Hashem will be zocha to. Again, we're talking about a tzaddik who's 52 years old, who has given us already a 25,000 to 30,000 page library of writings. But what Rav Meir is being mechadesh, but also not being mechadesh, based on the tangent we just spoke about, is the fact that the way to settle this question, the way to settle the distinction or the paradox between, on the one hand, the impossibility of grasping essence, and on the other hand, the fundamental need to always direct oneself towards the essence of God, is a reading of this medrash. The medrash says, a love velo lemidosav, directly to him and not to his midos. But what Rav Meir shows in countless writings, in particular Tafshin Ayin Dalet in his Biur and Hakdamas Rechavas Anar, and Tafshin Ayin Aleph in the Maimer I love V'lo Lemidosav, Rav Meir coins a term which he describes in two different ways, basically textually in two different ways. That the first turn of phrase is a love b'derech midosav, to him by way of his traits. And elsewhere it's described as a love be'emtsauso midosav, to him through his traits. Either way you look at it textually, the way that I am more used to, or that I feel is expressed more explicitly in the writings, is a love b'derech midosav. That the way that Rav Meir comes to settle this paradox is that not only can we not reach a love, we can't directly reach towards the essence, and there's also a prohibition of avodah zarah, of connecting to his midos, or his traits, and the revelations that God has created in the world. To chas v'shalom daven to a sthira or a partzuf would be tantamount to bowing down to avodah zarah, as the Meforshim and the Rishonim have described. What Rav Meir does is he parses his way in a middle path, which is Kedarcho Bakodesh, which says that a love b'derech midosav. That yes, we have a direct relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a love, directly to the etzem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, directly to the inner essence of what it means to be a ma'amin, of what it means to be an individual who has emunah and bitachon and is capable of being moser nafsham and giving themselves over to what they believe is holy. And that any moment that we daven a word or we make a bracha with any added intention or attention or kavana, a little bit more than what we did yesterday, we have a direct connection to godliness, without any distinctions between essence and non-essence, of traits or essential qualities. It's a direct route, directly from the heart of the individual, from the mind of the individual, directly to the creator of the world, Kavyachol. That any anxiety that a person has, any moment of sadness or tzabrachenkeit or overwhelmingness or movement towards yeyush that a person experiences, when they're mitgaber over it, or when they descend deeply into it to find the hope or the recesses of hope that animate that space, there is a direct connection, an immediacy between the individual and HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol. according to the conjecture of the individual's own heart. Like Rabbi Nachman has already taught us in the beginning of Sichos Haran, as well in multiple places in Likutei Moharan, and Rabbi Meir echoes throughout his writings in Shal Shudas and De'ei Chachma L'Nafshecha, that each and every person has a deep understanding of what it means to connect to Hashem, b'chvodo uva'atzmo, within the recesses of their own heart. Yet nevertheless, it's almost impossible to convey to another individual, not almost impossible, it's impossible to convey to another individual what exactly it is that I believe in. Now, yes, we have the Yud Gimel Ikrei Amunah, and we have the Svivum and the Makifim and the surrounding lights that codify and define exactly what it is we believe in. Yet nevertheless, when it comes down to the deep, innermost singular point of subjectivity that exists within the recesses of each and every individual heart, there is an impossibility of conveying to another individual exactly what we are describing or what we are connecting to. Now, it's important to keep in mind that this impossibility of describing to another individual what it is that we believe in, or what we have emunah in, or what we connect to in our moments of darkness, or why we're being moser nefesh, or why we're giving ourselves over to things beyond ourselves, or why we're willing to uproot ourselves from spaces of comfort for the sake of something bigger. This is not because of a deficiency within the individual, but it's because constitutive to the inherent relationship between the subject and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, between each and every particular neshama and their own particular understanding of the infinite God, it's constitutive that I cannot describe it to another person. That it's not something that can be captured by osios. It's not something that can be contained within verbiage or the confines and the materiality of letters or words. It's something that is tali b'reusa deliba, in the desire of the heart, which reaches even higher than the conjecture of the mind, as we're going to see a statement that is attributed to the Zohar at the end of this year. I cannot convey to another individual what it is I believe in, or what it is that I'm connecting to. But nevertheless, it remains fundamentally true that any time I experience anything in this world, any movement, as the Baal Shem Tov taught me, I have a direct connection, a love. I have an immediate connection with God, b'chvodo uba'atzmo, kavyachol. Yet nevertheless, that connection is always through the mediated experience of midosav. That when I grasp the essence, it's only by way of the inessential. When I grasp HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's only through the revelatory garments and midos and traits and sviros and partsufim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has disclosed himself in and through to create this worldliness. So that through this textual emendation that Rav Meir applies to the words of Chazal, or an interpretation of Chazal that he draws down from the Mekubalim that preceded him, in particular in this sugya, the Ben Ish Chai, in the beginning of his Sefer Das Tvunos, as well as the Gra in his parish on Safeditz Niusa, as well as in his parish on the Heichalos of the Zohar and Parshas Bereshis and Pekudei, the direct and immediate relationship with godliness is specifically through the mediation of the midos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has revealed himself in. So that both paradoxical statements of Chazal that we began this discussion with remain true at the end of the day. Yes, the interdiction against moving directly towards the infinite essence stands in its place. It's prohibited, it's usur for an individual to claim that I have a direct relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvodo ba'atzmo without any midos, without any levushim, because that's tantamount to the corporealization or applying midos and limitations to the infinite. By claiming that the finite can touch the infinite, there's claiming that the finite can eventually become the infinite, chas v'shalom. On the other hand, we have the deep klal, the deep principle that says anytime we utter a word, anytime we move, anytime we have any thought in the heart or in the mind, it's a direct relationship with the essence of God, kavyachol, and not chas v'shalom, a relationship with some sort of intermediary, God forbid. And the way that Rav Meir describes and settles this machlokas, or settles this paradox, is saying that on the one hand, the only access that we have to God, The only access that we have to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is through the revelations through which the Infinite revealed himself in this world. And that includes all of the worlds of Adam Kadmon and Atzilus and Bria, Yetzira and Asiya. And all of the Siros of Keser, Chochma, Bina, Chesed, Gvur, Tferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod, and Malchus. And all of the Partzufim of Atek Yoimin and Erech Anpin and Abba V'ima Eloi and Yisrael Sabbat V'Tvuna and Zer Anpin and Malchus. All of those things are contained within the word Midosav. Everything that we see, the veil of existence, the worlds, the materiality of the worlds, the Torah, the Tefillah that we have, the liturgy that we contain, our emotional veils, the personalities that we encounter, the difficulties that we go through, all of that is contained within the concept of Midosav, the measurements through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself in. And that's the only access that we have to God. But it's specifically when we engage in his Midos, when we engage and we attempt to connect to what Hashem has revealed to us in this world, that miraculously and simultaneously we are touching the essence of God. That there is an immediacy. Immediacy implies that there is no separation. There's no distinction. There's no duration. There's no partition separating me and the infinite God. There's an immediate relationship. Nothing stands between us. No need for mediation. On the other hand, mediated implies that there's a go-between, that there's something essentially separate between me and my Creator. And the Chiddush of Rav Meir here, which is really the Chiddush of the Arizal, which is really the Chiddush of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which is really the Chiddush of the Torah itself, as we see in the Pasuk in Dvarim Daled Zayin, is that even though the only access that we have towards God is by way of mediation, is by way of his midos, is by way of the worlds that God has kavyachol created for us, is by way of the tzimtzum and by way of constriction and by way of concealment and by way of the veil of reality that blocks us and occludes us from ever truly grasping the true nothingness of existence, the nothingness of our own egos. Nevertheless, even though we're stuck within that mediated state of arrested development, of having not been able to move beyond the confines of this worldliness, nevertheless, when we access that place, we also touch, by way of the miraculous koyach of the Pella Elyon, of the wondrous, paradoxical way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has revealed himself to us, that it's specifically when we engage in the midos, when we learn Torah, when we daven, when we look at the world in all of its fallenness, when we engage with ourselves in all of our emotional disruption, and we engage in our relationships with all of their bilbulim, and we have all of our doubts and our sveikos, it's specifically when we touch those experiences that we have a direct relationship with the infinite essence itself. But because we cannot touch the essence itself without way of mediation, we can never truly describe how it is that we touch the essence. All we know is, like the Balatanya says, that when a person goes out to hug the king, they don't come back crying because they only got to hug the clothing of the king. That a person understands that the power of the king is that the essence of the king is revealed within the garments themselves. That in spite of the fact that we can never touch HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvaydo u'ba'atzmo, and the only thing we have access to are the midos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nevertheless, contained within those midos, contained within those descriptive manifestations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and those revelatory powers or strengths that Hashem has revealed in this world, we gain access to the infinite by way of the finite. It's specifically in our engagement with the Gevul. It's specifically with our deep and abiding awareness that we exist within the finite space of limitation that can never move fully beyond itself, that we're capable of touching the infinite that animates the finite. It's specifically that koyach hagvul, that power of limitation, that when we recognize that that power of limitation is also a revelation of the unlimited, that the koyach hagvul is also a symptom of the infinite, because to deny finitude or finite manifestation from the infinite is already tantamount to denying the true infinitude of it, like we saw throughout the writings on Rav Kook and the Leshem and the Shirim on Addiction in the name of Rabbeinu Azriel. That when a person realizes that all of finite manifestation is simply an expression of the infinite, when we touch the finite expression of the infinite, we're also touching the infinite. Like the Baal Shem Tov teaches us, and Rav Yitzchak uses so often to prove his point, hatoifes chelak min ha'etzem, somebody who touches a part of the essence, toifes ha'etzem kulo, is touching the entirety of the essence. That even when we're stuck in the pratiyut, when we're stuck in the particularity of this worldliness, and make no mistake about it, particularity means, on an individual level, all of the symptoms of what it means to be a human being. This is once again where I want to pause and say that what I'm trying to also do with Rav Yitzchak's Torah is show the therapeutic value in it. Is show how not only are these speculative concepts or insights meant to explode the mind in their creativity and their ingenuity, but they're also meant to allow the mind to access the heart so that we can live life with a little bit more amuna, a little bit more menuchas hanefesh, a little bit more shalvus hadas, to be a little bit more ragua, to have a little bit more settledness in our lives. That is the ikar tachlis of Ratza HaKadosh Baruch Hu lios lo b'dira b'tachtoinim. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted his Torah to leave that elevated space of the celestial realms and become something that is applicable to the individual in their lowly state. And Rav Yitzchak describes this in multiple places, that the koyach of a tzaddik is to be above and below at once. And the story he likes to quote to prove this as a source text is what the Tzemach Tzedek brings down in the name of the Baal HaTanya, in the name of the Magid, that it was specifically by Mincha on Shabbos, on Erev Shabbos, that Hasidim would come to talk to the Baal Shem Tov about things that were breaking their heart, about the difficulties of what it meant to be a Jew, of the difficulties of what it meant to hold on to faith, of the difficulties of what it meant to move beyond the self, to stop being so saturated with ourselves, to stop being so afraid of our potential, to stop being so stuck in our need for affirmation, but rather to move beyond ourselves. It was specifically there when those Hasidim were talking to the Baal Shem Tov that he was capable of experiencing the deepest yichud. Because the only godless of a tzaddik is when they're able to be in two places at once, above and below. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like the Kotzker says, has enough tzaddikim, has enough malachim rather. What he wants is human beings who are capable of being down here in this world. And it's specifically by being in this world that we're capable of touching the next world. It's specifically through the limitation and the vessels of midos, of measurement, of the traits that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has revealed to us so that we as finite creatures could connect to the infinite. It's specifically through that space that we have the capacity of touching the infinite, that it's specifically a love. It's reaching towards the infinite by way of immediacy without distinction, but specifically in the distinction. Only when we access the interruption between us and God can we access the true connection that reveals retroactively that even the interruption was part of our relationship with God. Again, it's only when we reach for the infinite through the finite manifestation of God that we're capable of realizing that even the finite manifestation of God is nothing but a new iteration of the infinite nature of godliness. So that the tzimtzum and everything that descends out of the tzimtzum down to the lowest level of gevuros and severity that we experience and the existential thisness of our individual lives is also touching the yesh ha'amiti, the true somethingness. Like the Mittler Rebbe, Skusa Yogin Aleinu, whose yahrzeit is coming up and whose day of redemption is coming up. And there's a chassid of Rav Yitzchak. There's a chassid of Rav Yitzchak who very recently published a kuntris about the Mittler Rebbe, a beautiful kuntris about his life, and Rav Yitzchak is excited about it. And this Torah of the Mittler Rebbe has to be revealed, and Be'ezras Hashem, I'm going to share it. It's specifically in the space of the yesh, of somethingness of this world, of being in this world, stuck in the limitation of this world, that we have the capacity of touching the yesh ha'amiti, the true something, capital S something, the true somethingness of the infinite creator. Now, this secret, this paradoxical truth that it's a love b'derach midosav, that it's specifically through the way of mediation, through the way of distinction and distortion and particularity, that we touch the unified whole that stands beyond particularity. This is what Rav Yitzchak refers to based on the letter from the Baal HaTanya in the Lashon of the Zohar HaKadosh as the Raz D'Mehimnusa, the secret of faith, because it's irrational. From a rational perspective, the human being can never have access to the essence. Leis machshava tvisa bechalal. The intellect can never grasp godliness. But on a super-rational level, by way of ru'usa de liba, by way of the emotions and the conjecture and the desire of the heart, which penetrates and shatters and annihilates the ceiling created by the intellect, a person can live with that paradox that on the one hand, I'm stuck in limitation, yet on the other hand, it's only in that limitation that I have the capacity of touching the unlimited, that it's only by being a human being that I could truly cultivate that sense of emunah. It's the secret of faith which demands there to be a concealment. Without concealment, there's no raza de mehemnusa. There's no need for emunas chabalelos. And as we said, the entirety of Rav Meir's project is to simply teach that the more emunah a person has, the higher they elevate themselves on the rung of avodah, to the point that they recognize that all there is emunah all the way up. All there is the malchus, which is emunah, which is eventually going to be revealed, as we're going to see next week, Be'ezras Hashem, in the Reishid Lo Isyada, in the unknowable head, the highest place in the Seder HaShtalshelus. And so Rav Meir calls this impossible, paradoxical relationship between finitude and the infinite, between the traits and the measurements and the concealment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has placed in the world, and the infinite that stands above that confinement and that measurement and minimization of godliness, that it's specifically in that paradox and that secret of faith that we can never truly understand, which gives us access to God. And this is why Rav Meir points out something profound, that we know that when we talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we talk about God, the essential name, the Shem Ha'etzem, is going to be the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, the four-letter name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which, as we discussed in the second and third and fourth shir, represents Haya Hoive V'Yihiyeh, that which was in the past, that which is in the present, and that which will be in the future when things revert back to the way they were in the past, which taught us about that Tosefes Kishut, that additional adornment, that added benefit that the infinite benefits from Kavyachol through descending through the finite, to show that even the finite is infinite, like we're discussing tonight. And it's that name, that Shem Ha'etzem, that name that we're not allowed to pronounce until the infinitely regressed future, until that future that stands ever beyond our human conception of temporality, that will only come, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe taught us, by Hesach Hadas, in a state of mindlessness, because any time we're attempting to contemplate the arrival, already says that we have no access to the arrival. It's only when we lose hope in the arrival that the arrival can possibly come. The Hesach Hadas. That name that cannot be uttered until the eventual arrival, the arrival of Mashiach, the arrival of Tikkun, the arrival of Yichud, is also the name that represents the parts of that's referred to as Zer Anpin, this world that we live in, the lowly souls of human beings, of the Jewish people in this world. So the essential name also represents the name that is stuck in the confines of limitation, stuck in the confines of the midos and the world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created. But this is specifically, Rav Meir says exactly what he's trying to say, that the truth is that the only thing we have access to is the midos. The only thing we have access to is the parts of Zer Anpin, is that space of Torah and Tefillah and the worlds that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has revealed to us, and the measurements through which godliness is reduced to the point that it becomes palpable to the human tongue. Yet nevertheless, it's those limitations themselves that hold on to the Shem Ha'etzem, because the essence is disclosed specifically through the inessential, because the infinite is disclosed specifically through the finite, because that which cannot be contained in words is specifically held within the words themselves, to the point that it's a razid de mehemnusa. It's a secret of faith that we hold on to so deeply that when we access the Torah, that when we read the words Bereshis bara Elokim, that when we daven Shemoneh Esrei, that when we say a Shahakol, that when we have emunah, when we have bitachon, when we try and bring shalom bayis, when we try and raise our children b'derech hayashar, when a person tries to look at a world that is shattered and broken and on fire and hold on to a belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we are not only moving through the mediation of the midos, but we are touching the essence of godliness, kavyachol, so that that moment is transformed into the fullest expression of what it means to be a neshama that is connected to the infinite. It's specifically in this world, in all of our confinement and all of our limitation, in the midos, that we have access to the unlimited. That is the secret of faith. That is the Raz de Mehimnusa. And I said earlier that next week we're going to discuss Malchus that is rooted in Reisha Delis Yada, but it's not true. Next week we're going to discuss the way that this is experienced. The words that are very often used to describe this experience are Ratza V'Shov, of running and returning, or Mati V'Lo Mati, of touching and not touching, or satisfaction and desire, or yearning or tshuka and yichud and unity. And we're going to see next week, B'ezras Hashem, how for Rav Yitzchak Meir, all of those dualities or those binaries, in truth, take place in the secret of faith, which is simultaneity, that they're happening at once. That it's specifically when we touch the removal from light that we actually have access to light. It's specifically in our hunger that we access satisfaction. And as we're going to continue to see, that the series of shirim that we're discussing of my interpretation of Rav Yitzchak Meir is building itself up to show how all of his Torah is one singular idea.